The first time I noticed something was wrong, I was sorting through Matteo's closet. Not his closet, his brother's closet. There's a difference, though I hadn't lived long enough in this house to understand the weight of it. You need warmer clothes, Matteo had said that morning, his accent wrapping around the words like velvet over broken glass. Winter in Milano will kill you if you're not careful. I'd laughed. I was from Chicago. I knew winter. But Matteo's version of concern had a way of translating into commands, so here I was, in his older brother's bedroom, a room Matteo rarely mentioned, a room I'd been told was hnoused, sifting through sweaters and linen that smelled like cedarwood and something else. Something metallic. Something like money and secrets pressed into fabric. The jacket was navy, tailored so perfectly it looked like a second skin. Worn enough to be broken in, but not worn enough to be forgotten. I pulled it on, and it swallowed me whole. The sleeves fell past my wrists, and the shoulders dwarfed my frame. But the weight of it felt like armor. That's when I found the photographs. They were tucked into the inside pocket, and I shouldn't have looked. I knew I shouldn't have looked. But the first edge of one was peeking out, and my fingers moved without asking my brain for permission. 3 photographs, all black and white, all old enough to have that grainy quality of something buried. In the first, 2 men stood on what looked like a balcony. Both dark-haired, both unmistakably brothers. I could see the architecture of Matteo in the stranger's face, but where Matteo's features were soft with boyishness, this man's were carved, cut. The kind of face that had been shaped by something harder than genetics. In the second, the same man was sitting at a desk. A gun lay on the mahogany surface in front of him, casual as a pen. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at something or someone to the left of the frame with an expression I couldn't name. Not anger, not quite hunger. Something that lived in the space between those 2 things. In the third photograph, he was younger. 20 maybe. Standing in front of a palazzo I recognized from Matteo's phone screensaver. His arm was around a woman with sharp eyes and a smile that looked like it hurt. But what made my breath catch, what made my fingers actually tremble, was the tattoo visible on his wrist, a symbol I'd seen before, circling the drain of Matteo's conversations. A sigil that meant something in this city. Something he'd never explained. That jacket looks better on you than it ever did on him. I spun so fast the world tilted. A man stood in the doorway. The man. The one from the photographs, except he was 3-dimensional now, and 3 dimensions didn't do justice to the sheer presence of him. He was tall, taller than the photographs suggested, and he wore an expression of such calculated calm that it took me a moment to realize it was a mask. Under it, something sharp was watching me. I'm sorry, Matteo said. My voice came out thin, fractured. The jacket suddenly felt like I'd been caught wearing something sacred. Matteo says a lot of things. He moved into the room with the kind of grace that belonged to something predatory. A lion. A shark. Something that didn't need to hurry because prey never escaped anyway. Most of them are designed to keep you from asking the right questions. Who are you? He smiled. It was a terrible smile. Beautiful and terrible. Like watching a building collapse in slow motion. I'm Dominic, he said. Matteo's brother. The one he's probably told you doesn't exist anymore. My mouth went dry. Matteo had mentioned an older brother once, and only because I'd asked directly about the photographs on his bedroom wall. He'd changed the subject so thoroughly, so aggressively, that I'd never asked again. I'd learned, in my 3 months living in this house, that Matteo's silences were deeper than most people's words. He said you were traveling. He says I'm dead. Dominic's eyes, dark brown, almost black in the winter light filtering through the tall windows, moved from my face to the photograph still clutched in my hand. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in that darkness. Did you like my diary? I didn't. You did. You're wearing his jacket like it belongs to you, and you have my memories in your hands. He took another step closer. The air between us got thinner. You definitely looked. I should have put the photographs down. I should have apologized. I should have done a lot of things. Instead, I clutched them tighter and met his eyes. Why hide them? His eyebrow lifted just slightly, but it was enough to change his whole face for a moment. The mask slipped, and I caught a glimpse of something raw underneath. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. Because, he said quietly, some stories are more dangerous than others. And you, Kara, are not built for the ones I could tell. You don't know what I'm built for. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a mistake. His smile widened, and something dark and interested moved behind his eyes. A hunger that had nothing to do with the body and everything to do with the mind. No, he agreed. But I'm gonna find out. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and the shift in his energy was so complete it was like watching a door slam shut. The danger that had been simmering beneath his skin suddenly accelerated. His jaw tightened. His hand clenched into a fist. Put the photographs back, he said, and his voice had changed. It was still soft, but it was no longer kind. And take off the jacket. No. I fumbled with the buttons. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip them. As I shrugged out of the navy fabric, Dominic reached out and caught it before it fell, and his fingers brushed my wrist. The contact was electric. Terrifying. What's happening? I whispered. Something, he said. That's gonna change everything. He was moving toward the door, the jacket draped over his arm like he'd already forgotten I existed. But at the threshold he paused. "Don't leave this room," he said, without turning around. "Don't make a sound, and don't let Matteo know you were in here. If you do, I won't be able to protect you from what comes next." Protect me from what? But he was already gone, moving down the hallway with the urgency of a man walking toward his own reckoning. I stood alone in that room, surrounded by the smell of cedarwood and secrets, and understood, with a clarity that felt almost premonitory, that my life had just fractured into before and after. And I'd never be whole in the same way again. I didn't leave the room. For 4 hours, I sat on the edge of his bed, Dominic's bed, I realized now, and listened to the house move around me like a living thing. Footsteps in the hallway, doors opening and closing, the distant sound of raised voices from what I assumed was Matteo's study. My phone buzzed twice. Both times it was my roommate from before, asking if I was coming to the party on Saturday. Both times I didn't respond. The thought of my old life, the before life where I worked at a gallery and had friends with normal problems and didn't live in a palazzo with men who hid photographs and disappeared into danger, felt impossibly distant. Like a dream someone else had had. Around 7, I heard footsteps in the hallway stop outside the door. My breath locked in my chest, but the footsteps continued past, and the moment shattered. It was Matteo who finally came for me, pushing the door open with the casual confidence of someone who didn't expect to find anything out of place. He was younger than Dominic by maybe 5 years, softer around the edges, with the kind of smile that probably worked on everyone who wasn't paying close attention. "More," he said, surprised. "What are you doing in here? It's freezing." I'd rehearsed a lie, but looking at him now, I saw something I hadn't seen before, a kind of fundamental dishonesty in his face. Not cruelty exactly, just the careful maintenance of a story he wanted you to believe. "I was looking for a sweater," I said. "You said I could." He moved across the room and pulled me up, his hand settling on my hip. His touch felt different now, calculated. "This room is locked after today," he said, his smile not wavering. "Dominic prefers his privacy." So he was still alive. Dominic was not only alive but real enough to have preferences. Real enough that Matteo felt the need to lie about him, to edit him out of the house like a deleted scene. "Okay," I said. "I didn't realize." Matteo kissed my forehead, a gesture that had felt tender 3 months ago and now felt like a locksmith sealing a door. "Come, I want to show you something." He took me down to his study, a room all dark wood and antique globes, and the kind of carefully curated luxury that screamed old money trying not to look like old money. On his desk was a laptop, and on the screen, a photograph of a woman I didn't recognize. "Her name is Alessandra Rossi," Matteo said, not sitting down, just standing close enough that I felt the weight of his presence. "She's a journalist, very ambitious, very dangerous to the wrong people." "Why are you showing me this?" "Because she's been asking questions about my family, about our business." He turned to look at me, and I caught a glimpse of something beneath his smile, a cruelty that I'd suspected but never confirmed. "I need you to do something for me." My stomach dropped. "Matteo, it's simple. You'll befriend her, you'll learn what she knows, you'll tell me." He said it like he was asking me to pick up milk at the market. "In return, I'll be very generous." "I can't do that." "Can't." He laughed, and it was a terrible sound, the laugh of someone who'd never heard the word no in his life. "You're living in my house, eating my food, wearing my clothes. You can, and you will." The sound came from above us, a sharp crack, like something breaking. We both looked up at the ceiling. For just a moment Matteo's composure fractured. Fear flashed across his face, genuine animal fear, and then it was gone, replaced by calculated anger. "Stay here," he said, and left the room. I waited until his footsteps had faded, then I followed, moving quietly up the marble staircase. The sounds were coming from the 3rd floor, from what I'd assumed was a storage area. The door was open, and I could see Dominic standing in the center of a room I'd never seen before, a room that looked like it existed outside normal time. Maps covered the walls, photographs, strings connecting different images like a web of conspiracy. Matteo stood across from him, and the air between them was so thick with tension I could barely breathe. "You can't keep doing this," Matteo was saying, his voice high and tight. "People are talking. They're asking questions." "Let them talk," Dominic replied. He didn't look at Matteo. His eyes were on one of the photographs, the same woman from Matteo's laptop. "Alessandra. She knows too much. She's just a journalist. She's a thread." Dominic finally turned to face his brother, and the shift in his body language was absolute. Every muscle seemed coiled ready. "Pull it, and the whole thing unravels. Which is why you're gonna leave her alone?" "I can't." "You can. You will." Dominic's voice was so low I could barely hear it, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. "And if you touch her, if you even think about using her, I will end you." Matteo's face flushed. "You're not in charge anymore. You chose to step back. You don't get to." The sound of breaking glass cut him off. Dominic had moved without my seeing it, and now there was a fist-sized hole in the window behind Matteo's head. Matteo flinched, his composure finally, completely shattered. I stepped back. Dominic said quietly, "Because I was trying to keep you alive. But if you insist on making yourself a liability, I can correct that." For a moment, I thought Matteo would fight back. I could see the rebellion in his shoulders, the desperate anger. But then he turned and saw me standing in the doorway, and something in him folded. He pushed past me without a word, leaving me alone with his brother. Dominic turned slowly. His knuckles were bleeding, dark drips falling onto the pale marble. He looked like he'd just come back from war, and maybe he had, the kind of war that happened in words and power and the fundamental violence of control. "You shouldn't be here," he said, but there was no anger in it. Just a kind of weary resignation. "What is this?" I gestured at the walls, at the web of secrets and surveillance. "What are you?" He looked at the photographs, at the string connecting one to the next. "I'm the thing that protects the people who live under this roof," he said finally. "Even when they don't want protecting. Even when they'd rather pretend I don't exist." "And Matteo?" "As weak. And weakness in this world doesn't just get you killed, it gets everyone around you killed." He finally met my eyes. "Which is why you need to leave." He told me to befriend that journalist, to spy on her. Something flickered across Dominic's face, not surprise. Something more like confirmation of a suspicion he'd already harbored. "Did he?" I said I couldn't do it. "Good." He reached up and touched his bleeding knuckles to his mouth, an almost absent gesture. "Because if you had, I would have had to kill him. And I've spent the last 5 years trying very hard not to do that." The way he said it, so matter of fact, so casually absolute, should have terrified me. It did terrify me. But it also did something else. It made me understand, finally, that Dominic wasn't the danger in this house. He was the only thing standing between me and it. "I want to help," I said. His laugh was sharp and broken. "You don't know what you're asking." "Then tell me." He studied me for a long moment, and I watched the calculation happen behind his eyes, weighing risk against benefit, logic against something else. Something that looked a lot like need. "Not tonight," he said finally. "But soon. Very soon. You're gonna have to choose which brother you're willing to die for. And Kara, I need you to choose carefully, because I can only save one of you. And it won't be him." The next morning, Dominic appeared at breakfast like a ghost made solid. I hadn't seen him since the previous night, and I'd convinced myself that maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. The photographs, the dark study, the confession of violence wrapped in silk and thread. But there he was, sitting at the head of the dining table with a cup of espresso and the newspaper, looking like he belonged in the daylight as much as the darkness. Matteo wasn't there. According to the housekeeper, he'd left before dawn for an appointment he'd forgotten to mention. "Running," Dominic said without looking up from his newspaper. "He's very good at that." I sat down across from him, and the housekeeper brought me coffee without being asked. The house seemed to understand what I needed before I did. That was how it worked here. Anticipation was currency, and I was still learning the exchange rate. "Is he gone for good?" I asked. "No. He'll be back in a few days, full of apologies and presents, convinced that if he buys your forgiveness he can buy your silence." Dominic finally looked up from the paper. The morning light caught his eyes differently than the day before. Less dark, more amber, like old whiskey. "That's his pattern. That's why he'll never be what this family needs him to be." "And what does your family need?" "Ruthlessness," he said, turning a page. "And the willingness to do what's necessary. Matteo has compassion. Compassion is a liability in our work. Your work." I wrapped my hands around the warm cup. "This is the part where you tell me what that actually is. If I tell you, you become a target. I'm already a target. Matteo just tried to weaponize me." Dominic set down the newspaper with deliberate care. "Yes, he did. Which means you've already crossed into dangerous territory. Which means I need to make a choice." "What choice?" "Whether keeping you alive is worth more than keeping my brother's last shred of dignity." He stood, and as he did, his shirt pulled up slightly, revealing a scar that ran from his hip bone nearly to his ribs. Old scar, deep scar. The kind that came from something that had tried very hard to kill you. "Come with me." He walked me through the house toward the back gardens, the part that everyone pretended didn't exist, where the palazzo's grounds gave way to wild growth and crumbling stone. It was beautiful in a way that felt almost obscene, like watching something ancient and powerful succumb to time. "My family is one of the oldest criminal organizations in Italy," Dominic said as we walked. His voice was casual, like he was discussing the weather. "We've been here for 300 years. We've owned judges and bishops. We've brought down governments. We've also donated more to hospitals and charities than most legitimate corporations." He paused at the edge of a fountain, its water long since drained. "The contradiction is the point. We're not good men playing at being bad. We're bad men trying very hard to maintain one thin thread of humanity. And you?" "I'm the thread." He turned to look at me. "I'm the part of my family that keeps the machine from consuming everything. I make the hard decisions. I do the things that need to be done so that my mother can sleep at night and my brother can pretend he's a better person than he is." "That sounds like a heavy price." "It is." He reached out and tilted my chin up with one finger, studying my face like it was a map he needed to memorize. "But you asked me to tell you. So now I'm telling you. My family is dangerous. I'm dangerous. This entire city is dangerous if you know where to look. And the only reason you're still breathing is because I've decided that losing you would be a worse outcome than any risk you represent." Why? He dropped his hand. For a moment, his whole face shifted into something vulnerable, just for a second, just long enough for me to see the exhaustion underneath the control. Then it was gone, locked back down. That's complicated, he said. Everything about this is complicated. He almost smiled. You should leave the city, go back to your old life, pretend this never happened. I can make it happen cleanly. You'll think this was all some strange dream. You'll be safe, and you. I'll still be here, still doing what needs to be done. Still keeping the machine oiled. He started walking back toward the house. But you won't have to watch it. I followed him, my heart moving in a rhythm I didn't recognize. What if I don't want to leave? He stopped so abruptly I nearly collided with him. When he turned, there was something new in his eyes, something that looked like hope and terror in equal measure. Then you'll be bound to me in ways you can't take back, he said. You'll know too much. You'll have to choose whose side you're on, and eventually, you'll have to choose between loyalty and survival. Most people don't survive that choice. Most people aren't me. No, he agreed quietly. They're not. We walked the rest of the way in silence, but when we reached the back entrance to the house, he caught my wrist. Not hard, just firm enough that I felt the electricity of his touch travel up my arm. The journalist, he said. Alessandra Rossi. She's close to something big. Something that could destroy my family or save us, depending on how we handle it. Matteo wants to use you to stop her. I want to help you understand her. And I want you to decide which path you take. Why would you help me help her? Because, he said, the only way this ends well for anyone is if the truth comes out. And the only person I trust to tell it is you. He released my wrist and went inside, leaving me alone in the morning cold, understanding finally that the jacket I'd found in his closet wasn't the only thing that fit me better than it should. Alessandra Rossi was nothing like I expected. She wasn't the ambitious, predatory type that Matteo had suggested. She was small and dark-eyed, with paint stains on her fingers and a laugh that sounded like breaking glass, sharp and real and dangerous in its authenticity. When Dominic arranged for us to meet at a cafe in the Navigli district, I realized immediately that nothing about this was accidental. He told me you'd be beautiful, she said, studying me over her cappuccino. But he didn't tell me you'd look like you were drowning. I nearly choked on my coffee. Excuse me. You have the look of someone in way over their head. It's written all over your face. She leaned back in her chair with the comfortable confidence of someone who didn't care if she offended you. So, who are you supposed to be? His new girlfriend, his spy, his inevitable tragedy. There was no point in lying. Something about Alessandra had the quality of a truth detector. She could smell deception like blood and water. Dominic's, I said finally. I'm supposed to be Dominic's. She laughed then, that glass-breaking laugh. Oh, Kara. Nobody is supposed to be Dominic's. People become his, and then they spend the rest of their lives figuring out whether that's the best thing or the worst thing that could have happened. Over the next 2 weeks, Alessandra and I became something close to friends. We met in different parts of the city, coffee shops, galleries, the open market near the Duomo. She showed me the city through a lens I hadn't known existed, the hidden history written in stone and water and the faces of old women selling flowers. And slowly, carefully, she told me what she'd discovered. Your boyfriend's family, she said one afternoon, as we walked along the canal, has been stealing from the government for 50 years. But not in the way you'd think. They're not just taking money, they're taking it from the wrong people, the people who are already stealing. It's a Robin Hood situation, except everyone involved is a criminal. Why write about it? I asked. Why not let it alone? Because the real story isn't about theft, it's about betrayal. She stopped at the edge of the canal and pointed to a building across the water. That's the Sforza family compound. Dominic's wife was a Sforza. She was killed 5 years ago, officially a car accident, but it wasn't. Someone made it happen and no one will say who. The information hit me like a physical blow. Wife, past tense. Dominic doesn't talk about it. Alessandra continued. But my research shows that whoever killed her was connected to someone inside his own organization. Someone close. That's why he stepped back from running things. He couldn't trust anyone anymore. That's why Matteo is in charge now, even though everyone knows he's not ready. That's why Dominic is still pulling strings from the shadows, trying to figure out which of his own people betrayed him. How do you know all this? Because I've been investigating the Mafia families of Milano for 3 years. Because I have sources inside the police, inside rival families, inside Dominic's organization itself. She turned to look at me. And because Dominic has been helping me, he gives me information and I verify it, and when the time is right, I tell the truth. That night, I confronted him in the study where I'd first seen the photographs. He was at his desk, marking something on a map with a pencil, and he looked up as I entered like he'd been expecting me. Maybe he had. Maybe he'd known all along that Alessandra would tell me everything. You're working with her, I said. Yes. To destroy your own family? To save my family, he corrected. There's a difference. My cousin orchestrated my wife's death. He did it because she'd discovered he was selling information to the Calabrian families, selling the kind of information that gets people killed. If I expose him, if I show the organization what he is, then we can rebuild. We can become something that deserves to survive. And if you're wrong, then the whole thing collapses, and people I love will die. He set down the pencil with careful precision. That's why I needed you. Because Alessandra needs verification. She needs someone inside the family to confirm details. Someone they wouldn't suspect. You were using me all along. No. He stood and moved toward me, but didn't touch me. I was trying to save you all along. The using part is just cover. The plausible deniability that keeps you from being guilty of treason. That's not how guilt works. It is in this world. The sound of the door slamming came from downstairs, followed by raised voices. Dominic's expression shifted into something cold and calculated, a war face. Matteo's back, he said. And he's not alone. We went downstairs to find 3 men in Matteo's study, dressed in the kind of expensive suits that screamed money born from blood. One of them, tall with silver at his temples and a smile like a blade, turned as we entered. Dominic, he said with exaggerated pleasure. How wonderful to finally see you in person. We were just discussing your retirement. Luciano. Dominic's voice was flat. I wasn't aware you'd made any decisions about my future. Oh, we haven't, Luciano said smoothly, but the Calabrian families have. They've decided that your continued existence has become a liability to their operations in the north. They've asked us to facilitate a resolution, and Matteo agreed. Matteo wouldn't meet his eyes. That was all the confirmation I needed. Your brother is a pragmatist, Luciano continued. He understands that you're a relic, a man who built an empire but couldn't protect the people closest to him. Your wife is dead. Your organization is fracturing, and your continued influence only destabilizes the region. Dominic didn't move. He didn't change his expression. But something in the room shifted anyway. It was like watching the air itself become a weapon. If that's what they want, he said quietly, then they should come do it themselves instead of sending my cousin to do it for them. Luciano's smile froze. For just a moment the mask slipped, and I saw genuine fear underneath. How did you? Because I know exactly who to trust in this organization, and it's no one. It's always been no one. Dominic took a step toward him. You killed Julia because she was going to expose you. You've been feeding information to the Calabrians for 3 years. And Matteo is covering it because you promised him the family business if he helped you remove me. You can't prove any of that. Matteo said desperately. I don't have to, Dominic replied. Alessandra already did. The name dropped like a stone into still water. Luciano's face went pale. One of the other men moved toward the door, but Dominic gestured slightly, and suddenly the room was full of people I'd never seen before. Men who materialized like they'd been waiting in the walls. Those photographs and documents are about to go public. Dominic continued. Unless, of course, you remove yourself from this city. All of you. You're bluffing, Luciano said, but his voice had lost its confidence. I'm not. Dominic smiled, and it was a terrible thing. In fact, by now, the documents are probably already in the hands of the police commissioner. The one who happens to owe me a favor. The one who's been wanting an excuse to purge the corruption from his department. Luciano moved toward me, his hand reaching out like he might grab me, use me as leverage. But Dominic was there before the thought had fully formed, and his hand closed around his cousin's wrist with the casual certainty of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Touch her, he said softly, and I'll remove your arm. Luciano was escorted out by security. Matteo followed, but he paused at the threshold, his face a mask of betrayal and desperation. I was just trying to keep us safe, he said. No, Dominic replied. You were trying to keep yourself comfortable. There's a difference. When they were gone, I realized I was shaking. Dominic pulled me into the study and closed the door. Now do you understand? He asked. Now do you see why I wanted you to leave? Is it over? No, it's just beginning. They tried to kill him 3 days later. A car bomb in the Palazzo garage. It was supposed to kill everyone inside a 20-meter radius. Instead, it killed the security guard who was walking past, and it fractured something in Dominic that I'd never seen fractured before. I found him on the roof in the rain, standing so still he looked like a statue someone had abandoned. His shirt was torn, and there was blood on his hands, not his, I realized. Someone else's? Is he dead? I asked. Yes. Was it Luciano? No, Luciano's in Milan now, trying to negotiate with the Calabrians for protection. Dominic still hadn't moved. This was someone else. Someone I trusted. Someone I was wrong about. I went to stand beside him, and the rain immediately soaked through my clothes. It was cold and real and present in a way that made everything else feel like a dream. What now? I asked. Now, he said quietly, we disappear. He'd planned for this contingency, the way he seemed to have planned for every contingency. There was a villa in the Lake Country, 2 hours north of the city. No connection to his name. No digital footprint. Just a place that existed in the gaps between official records. It took us 4 hours to get there, moving through roads I didn't recognize in a car I'd never seen before. Dominic drove with one hand, the other wrapped around my wrist, not holding me captive, just holding. Like I was the only real thing in a world that had become suddenly unstable. The villa was beautiful in the way that all old things are beautiful, weathered and elegant, with stones that had stories written in their cracks. It sat on a cliff overlooking the lake, and when we arrived, the sun was going down, painting the water in shades of gold and blood. How long do we stay? I asked. Until it's safe. What if it's never safe? He finally turned to look at me, and his eyes had the quality of someone who'd lived in darkness so long that light had become a foreign language. Then we stay forever. The villa had only 2 bedrooms, and he put me in one while he took the other. But that first night, I heard him moving through the halls at 3 in the morning, pacing like something caged. So I went to him, pushing open the door to his room, and finding him standing at the window, staring out at the dark water. Couldn't sleep, I asked. I stopped needing sleep a long time ago. Now I just exist through the nights and try not to think. He didn't turn around. This is your last chance. I can arrange safe passage to America, a new identity, a life that has nothing to do with any of this, and leave you here. Yes. No. I moved next to him at the window, my reflection ghostly in the glass. You said I had to choose which brother to die for, but I choose you. I choose you even though it's probably going to destroy me. He turned then, and pulled me against his chest, and I felt all the tension in his body finally give way. He was crying, not openly, just the kind of tears that come from deep places, the kind that a man like him had probably been holding back for years. I killed for you. He said into my hair. Before I even knew you, I killed the men who had plans for you. I kept you alive in a house that was designed to consume you. I made myself the villain in a story where I'm supposed to be your savior. And I'd do all of it again. I know. You shouldn't know. You should hate me. I probably do, I said. And I probably love you anyway. He pulled back far enough to look at me, and something in his expression shifted into something softer, something that looked almost like hope. Don't, he whispered. Please don't love me. Not here. Not where I can believe it. But he was kissing me before I could respond, and his kiss tasted like rain and smoke, and the kind of desperation that comes from thinking you might lose something before you'd even had a chance to hold it. It wasn't gentle. It was demanding and overwhelming, like he was trying to consume me or become me or both. When we finally pulled apart, we were both gasping. This is a mistake, he said, but his hands were still on me, still holding me like I might disappear. Probably. We should maintain distance. Definitely. I'm gonna hurt you. I know. He pulled me back toward his mouth, and this time when he kissed me, it was with the kind of intensity that burned. His hands moved up the back of my shirt, and he held me like I was the only real thing in a world that had gone mad. We didn't go further than that first night. There was something almost sacred about the restraint, about choosing not to despite the overwhelming hunger to. By morning, we were tangled together, his arm around my waist, his breath in my hair. Outside, the lake was a mirror, reflecting a sky that promised storms. For 3 days, we existed in a strange pocket of time where the rest of the world didn't matter. We didn't talk about the bomb or Luciano or the men who wanted him dead. We just existed in the same space, learning each other in ways that had nothing to do with bodies, and everything to do with the impossible architecture of trust. On the 4th day, his phone buzzed. I watched his face as he read the message, watching the softness drain away until he was all marble and control again. Alessandra's in danger, he said quietly. The Calabrians know she has the documents. They're gonna move against her before the police commissioner can act. We have to help her. If we do, we lose our hiding place. We lose the only place that was ever safe. I know. He looked at me like he was memorizing my face, storing the image against some future where I wouldn't be here. Come on, he said finally. We have 12 hours to save her life and then everything changes again. Getting to Alessandra took us back into the city, back into the places where Dominic was known by sight and feared by reputation. We arrived at her apartment to find 2 men already posted outside, watching, waiting. Dominic took them both down in a way that was so efficient it was almost beautiful, all economy of movement, all precision. No wasted effort, no unnecessary violence. Alessandra answered the door with a gun in her hand, and only slightly lowered it when she saw us. I was wondering when you'd show up, she said. I've been expecting the cavalry. We need to move you now, Dominic said. The Calabrians are coming. Let them come. She gestured for us to enter, and I noticed for the first time that she looked exhausted, bone-deep exhausted. The kind that came from not sleeping for days. I've already sent the documents to 17 media outlets, 3 international police agencies, and the Vatican. I felt Dominic shift beside me. You sent them? An hour ago. By now they're probably already being verified. By tomorrow, the entire northern organized crime network is going to be in chaos. By next week, half the people we know will be arrested. She set down the gun and poured herself a drink with shaking hands. Your cousin is finished. The Calabrians are finished. Hell, the commissioner probably has enough on his hands that he won't even come after you, because there will be too many more important criminals to chase. You didn't tell me, Dominic said quietly. Because you would have tried to stop me. Because you would have taken the bullet meant for me, the way you took it for Julia, the way you take it for everyone. She turned to look at him, and there were tears in her eyes. I loved her, Dominic. Not the way you did, but I loved her. And I wasn't gonna let you sacrifice yourself for her memory. The moment stretched thin and fragile between them. Outside, we could hear the sound of sirens beginning to multiply, beginning to converge on this part of the city. Go, Alessandra said. Both of you, take the back exit through the parking garage. Head south toward the lake country. By the time they realize what's happening, you'll be gone. Come with us, I said. She smiled, and it was sad and kind and absolutely final. No. I'm gonna stay and tell my story. I'm gonna testify. I'm gonna make sure that what I've done actually means something. She looked at Dominic. I'm gonna finish what Julia started. We could hear footsteps in the stairwell. Dominic caught my hand and pulled me toward the back of the apartment, but he turned one last time to look at Alessandra. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me. Just live, that's all I'm asking. Just live, and make it worth her death. We made it to the parking garage just as the police arrived, just as the raid began. Dominic drove with practiced calm, ignoring checkpoints and speeding through amber lights, and I watched his hands on the steering wheel and understood, finally, what he'd done and what it had cost him. When we reached the lake house, it was past midnight, and he sat in the car for a long time without turning off the engine, without moving, without breathing like a normal person would. She knew, I said quietly. Alessandra knew that the minute she sent those documents, she was sacrificing her anonymity. She was giving up any chance of a normal life. Wes. And you would have stopped her if you'd known. Les. Why? He finally turned off the engine and turned to look at me. In the dark, his face was all shadow and bone structure, all the vulnerable parts hidden away again. Because I can't save everyone, he said. And I've been trying so hard to save everyone that I forgot how to save myself. You understood that. Alessandra understood that. And it's a mercy because it means that when this is all over, I'll still have you. If you want me. I've always wanted you, he said. From the moment I saw you wearing my jacket, looking at my photographs like you were trying to read the story of my life written on paper. I wanted you before I knew wanting you would make me weak. Before I knew that weakness could be the only thing standing between living and existing. We went inside, and this time when we came together, it was different. It was slower. It was softer. It was the kind of intimacy that comes after the war, the kind that acknowledges that both people might not survive the night, but is determined to make the night matter anyway. He loved me with the kind of deliberation that suggested he was trying to memorize every sensation, every reaction, every small gasp and whispered word. He was gentle in a way I'd never expected from someone so dangerous, and I realized that gentleness in him was the rarest thing of all, a gift earned through blood and loss and the hard, won knowledge that softness, sometimes, is the most powerful thing a person can offer. Afterward, we lay in the dark, and he was quiet for a long time before he spoke. When I was 17, he said, my father made me kill a man, not for business. Just to prove I was ruthless enough to take over the family. The man was a driver we knew. He was kind. He had 3 children. Dominic's voice was very steady, very calm. I shot him in the back of the head while he was sitting in his car. I watched him die and I felt nothing. That's when I knew I was either the worst person alive or I was built for something most people weren't built for. And now? I asked. Now I think maybe the worst part is that I don't regret it. I regret that it had to happen, but I don't regret the man I became because of it, because that man was capable of protecting you. That man was built for this. He turned to look at me. But I want to stop being that man. For you I want to try. You can't stop. That man is the only reason we're both still alive. I know. That's the real tragedy. That the cost of saving you is that I'll never be the kind of man you actually deserve. I reached over and touched his face, traced the line of his jaw with my fingertips. You're exactly the man I deserve, I said. Because you're the only man who could have found me in the dark and decided I was worth bringing back to the light. He kissed my fingers like they were sacred. And we held each other through the rest of the night. Neither of us quite believing that morning would come, that we'd somehow survived. But morning did come, in shades of pink and gold, and with it came the beginning of the end. The news broke at dawn. I woke to Dominic standing at the window, watching the sun rise over the lake, his phone screen reflected in his face. The light from the device made his features look carved, ancient, like something that had been waiting millennia to break. It's done, he said quietly. Alessandra's story is everywhere. They've arrested 17 members of the organization, including Matteo. I felt something inside me fracture, not grief exactly, but recognition. Matteo was my entry point into this world, and seeing him destroyed felt like destroying part of myself. What happens now? I asked. No, they come for me. He set down the phone. It's just a matter of time. The police will eventually figure out that I was involved in feeding Alessandra information. When they do, they'll have to arrest me or negotiate with me. Either way, this ends. Not necessarily. We could leave. Go somewhere with no extradition treaties. Start over. Where would we go? He turned to face me and his expression was impossibly sad. Every place I've ever been I've left blood. Every life I've touched I've corrupted. And you're asking me to do it again just in a different country. That's not fair. No, it's not. But it's true. I got out of bed and pressed myself against him, breathing in the scent of him. Rain and smoke and the particular fragrance of his skin. So what are you saying? I'm saying that you should leave. This morning, I'll arrange a car, a new identity, money. Everything you need to disappear into a normal life. And if I don't want normal, Then you choose to spend the rest of your life running, or hiding, or mourning a man who destroyed his own world trying to build something clean. He put his arms around me, but his touch was distant, like he was already practicing the goodbye. You deserve better than this. I deserve what I choose. And what do you choose? The question hung in the air between us, pregnant with consequence. I wanted to say something that would make it easier, something that would let him off the hook of his own guilt. But I'd learned that easy wasn't a luxury available in this world. I choose you, I said. Even knowing what that means. Even knowing it will probably kill me. He was quiet for a very long time. Okay, then we need to talk about what comes next. What came next was the police arriving at the villa at noon. 4 cars, tactical gear, and the kind of bureaucratic authority that couldn't be negotiated with. Dominic surrendered without resistance, something that surprised me until I realized he'd been planning for this, orchestrating this, using his arrest as a way to control the narrative. It's gonna be okay, he said as they cuffed him. I have lawyers, I have deals, I'll be out in a week. You're lying. Yes, but only about the timeline. He looked at me as they were leading him away. The deals are real. The lawyers are real. I'm buying our way out of this. It's just going to take longer than a week. I found out later that he'd made a deal with the police commissioner. Full testimony in exchange for immunity on a dozen counts. Immunity that couldn't be revoked no matter what else he revealed. He was throwing his entire organization under the bus, burning bridges that had been standing for 300 years, dismantling the empire his family had built. It took 2 weeks. 2 weeks of visiting him in prison, of watching him get smaller, more tired, more like a ghost of himself than a man. 2 weeks of news cycles consuming his confession, his testimony, his systematic destruction of everything he'd ever been. And on the 15th day they released him. He was thinner, great at the temples in a way he hadn't been before. And when I saw him walk out of the police station, I barely recognized him. This wasn't the dangerous man in the photographs. This was someone hollowed out, someone who'd given away so much of himself that there wasn't much left. He came toward me, and when he pulled me into his arms he felt breakable. I destroyed everything, he said into my hair. The organization is fragmenting. My family won't speak to me. My name is now synonymous with betrayal. You saved innocent people. You stopped the killings. I saved you. That's all I've ever cared about. He pulled back far enough to look at me. I did it for you. Every betrayal, every revelation, I did it so you wouldn't have to be collateral damage in someone else's war. What now? Now we leave Italy. We disappear into a new life in a new place with new identities. We don't contact anyone. We don't look back. We just exist and we make it matter. It sounded beautiful. It sounded impossible. We made it 3 months. 3 months of a small apartment in Prague, of learning new names and practicing new histories, of Dominic working in a bookshop and me in a gallery, trying to be ordinary in ways we'd never been trained for. But the past doesn't stay buried. It has a way of rising up when you least expect it, teeth bared and hungry. We were coming home from dinner when I saw the car. One of the men inside smiled, and I recognized him immediately. He was one of the Calabrian associates, one of the men who'd been hunting Dominic since he'd destroyed his organization. Run, Dominic said quietly. We're way down the street into the first building you see anywhere but here. Don't look back. He pushed me, hard enough that I stumbled forward, and I heard the car door open behind me. I didn't want to leave him. Every instinct I had screamed at me to stay, to fight, to face whatever was coming together. But I also knew that his first priority was getting me to safety, and that me fighting that imperative would only make him weaker. So I ran. I could hear the sounds of the fight behind me, glass breaking, metal crunching, bodies colliding. I made it to an apartment building and slipped through the open door, and from the window I watched Dominic fight against impossible odds with a grace that was almost beautiful in its brutality. He was outnumbered 6-1, and he was dying, but he was doing it with such precision, such control, that it took me a moment to understand that he wasn't trying to win. He was trying to buy me time. 2 of the men went down, but not before one of them got a knife in Dominic's ribs. I watched him react to it, watched his body recognize the wound, watched pain flare across his face for just an instant before he controlled it. Then he was moving again, and the man with the knife wasn't moving anymore, because his neck was at an angle that necks weren't supposed to bend. The police arrived before the final confrontation could happen. Someone in the building had called, or maybe someone on the street had seen it, or maybe Dominic had some kind of signal I didn't understand. The remaining Calabrians ran, and Dominic collapsed to the ground, bleeding, gasping, looking more human than I'd ever seen him. I ran to him without thinking about consequences or safety or any of the things he'd taught me to think about. Don't touch the knife. He gasped as I reached him. I need to stay conscious until the ambulance arrives or I'll bleed out faster. You're going to be okay, I said, and I was lying, and we both knew it. No, but you're going to be. He reached up with a shaking hand and touched my face. That's the only thing that matters. He did survive. Barely. The knife had missed his organs by millimeters, and the doctors kept saying words like lucky and miraculous. but what they meant was that Dominic had years of training in knowing exactly where the vital parts of his body were located, and he'd controlled his fall so that the impact wound wouldn't be fatal. He'd been saving his own life the same way he'd been saving mine, with violent, precise knowledge. When he was stable enough to talk, the police came to the hospital with questions. This time, there was a lawyer waiting, someone I'd never seen before, someone Dominic had clearly arranged beforehand for exactly this scenario. "We'll be safe," the lawyer told me. "There's a witness protection program. Dominic will testify against the Calabrian families, and in exchange they'll disappear. New names, new city, new lives. Completely off the grid for how long?" I asked. "Until they're satisfied that there's no more threat. Could be years." I went back into Dominic's hospital room and found him staring out the window at a gray prague that looked like it was morning. "I'm sorry," he said before I could say anything. "I'm sorry that I can't give you a normal life. I'm sorry that every choice I make leads to more blood, more danger, more running. You saved my life. And it cost you everything else." I sat on the edge of his bed and took his hand carefully, aware of the IV lines and the monitors tracking his heartbeat. "Do you remember the first day? When you asked me why I didn't leave less? I meant it then. I mean it now. You're not asking me to run towards something, Dominic. You're asking me to run with you. And I choose that. Every day I choose that." He pulled me down to him, and he was crying now, not hiding it, not controlling it, just letting the tears come because he was in a hospital bed bleeding from a knife wound, and the woman he loved was refusing to leave. "I don't know how to be a normal person," he whispered. "I know. But you can learn. We can learn together. What if I'm broken? Then we'll be broken together." Over the next few weeks, as he recovered, we made plans. Dominic's deal with the authorities was finalized. He would testify, and in exchange, we'd get new identities in a country that had no connection to his past. New names, new histories. A chance, however fragile, to build something that didn't have blood in the foundation. The night before we were supposed to leave, Dominic brought me the jacket. The navy jacket from the palazzo, the one I'd found on my first day in his life. I don't know how he'd gotten it out of Italy, how he'd kept it through all the chaos and destruction. But there it was, folded carefully, placed on the bed like an artifact from another life. "So you don't forget," he said. "Forget what?" "That when we were first learning each other, you were terrified and beautiful and brave, and I was the man who wore this jacket and hid his photographs and tried very hard not to fall in love with you." He helped me put it on, and it still swallowed me, and it still felt like armor. I want to be that man again, the one who had enough control to hide things from you, the one who could function without you. You can't go backward, we can only go forward. I know. But I wanted to remember what it felt like before I became someone who can't live without you. The new city was Stockholm, cold, beautiful, and so aggressively normal that it felt like a foreign language at first. We moved into a small apartment in Gamla stan, the old town, where the cobblestone streets twisted like a labyrinth and tourists bought overpriced coffee and took photographs. To anyone watching, we were just a quiet couple, him working in a bookshop, me doing freelance art curation for a gallery that specialized in contemporary Scandinavian pieces. We had new names, Marcus and Sophia. New histories constructed so carefully that they could survive almost any background check. But at night, I would lie awake and listen to Dominic sleep, or not sleep, because he still couldn't really do that, and I would wonder if we could actually pull this off. If we could actually become these new people and mean it. 3 months into our new life, the nightmares started. I'd wake to find him standing at the window, staring out at the medieval streets below, his body shaking like he was cold even though the apartment was warm. I'd try to hold him, and he'd let me, but there was a distance in him that hadn't been there before. A space that was growing. "What are you thinking about?" I asked him one night. "Guilt," he said. "I testified against the Calabrian families. 37 men are now in prison because of my testimony. I destroyed an organization that had been running for 70 years. And I'm not sorry. So why are you suffering?" "Because I'm supposed to be sorry. I'm supposed to be filled with regret and remorse and some kind of moral reckoning. But I'm not. And that makes me more of a monster than I was before." I pulled him away from the window and back toward the bed. "You're not a monster. You're a man who made hard choices. I'm a man who's learned to enjoy making hard choices. There's a difference." He let me pull him close. "What if I wake up one day and realize I've turned you into something you weren't? What if this version of me, the dangerous, obsessive, protective version, has already corrupted you in ways you don't recognize? Then we deal with it together." But the space didn't shrink. If anything, it grew. Dominic became more withdrawn, more introspective, more convinced that his existence was fundamentally toxic to anyone who got close enough to matter. He stopped touching me the way he used to. He stopped looking at me like I was the reason he was fighting. He started looking at me like I was the reason he should stop fighting. I recognized it finally for what it was, a man trying to decide whether he loved me enough to let me go. The confrontation happened in the bookshop, on an afternoon when we were supposed to be just another quiet couple in just another quiet city. "I've been offered a job," I said, not meeting his eyes. "A full-time position at a major gallery. In Copenhagen, it's everything I wanted, everything I've been working toward. So take it. It would mean leaving, moving away, separating, so take it, he repeated, and there was no emotion in his voice. You've spent 2 years bound to me, running with me, hiding with me. Maybe it's time you took your life back. This is my life. You're my life. No, he said, and for the first time in months, he looked directly at me. I'm a choice you made when you didn't have better options. Now you do. Take the job. Go to Copenhagen. Build the life you were supposed to have. I don't want that life. You will. Eventually, and I won't watch it happen. I won't watch you resent me for keeping you here. I wanted to argue with him. I wanted to fight, to scream, to make him understand that this wasn't about duty or obligation or some misguided sense of what was best for me. But I saw the shutters closing in his eyes, saw him building walls again, saw him preparing to be the kind of man who could survive without me. And I understood that maybe the kindest thing I could do was let him. So I took the job in Copenhagen. I moved into a small apartment by the water, and I threw myself into work with a desperation that felt almost suicidal. Every painting I curated, every artist I championed, every exhibition I designed, it was an attempt to build a life so full of meaning that there wouldn't be room for the ache of missing him. But there was always room for the ache. 2 months into my new life, he showed up at the gallery without warning. He looked like a ghost, thinner, older, wearing the kind of exhaustion that came from living alone with your own thoughts. But he was there, and he was looking at a painting I'd just hung, one of a woman standing at a window, looking out at a storm, her silhouette dark against the gray light. It's beautiful, he said. It's by a Swedish artist. She works primarily in themes of separation and longing. Are you happy? The question landed like a stone, heavy and impossible to move. No, I said. Are you? No, I've been absolutely miserable. He finally turned to look at me. I was wrong. About the separation. About the idea that I was corrupting you or holding you back. I was just afraid that if you stayed, eventually you'd realize you'd made a mistake. I haven't. I know. I know that now. He moved closer. I've been thinking about that first night in the palazzo. How I told you that you'd have to choose which brother to die for. And you chose me without hesitation, and I've been trying to take that choice back ever since. But I can't. I don't want to. What are you saying? I'm saying, he said quietly, that I'm asking you to come back. Not to Stockholm, not to a bookshop pretending to be a normal life, but to me, to whatever comes next, as long as it includes you. I should have said no. I should have been strong enough to recognize this pattern, to understand that we were circling each other like animals, that every moment we were together was a moment we were choosing destruction. But I'd never been strong enough when it came to Dominic. So I called my gallery, gave my notice, and packed my apartment. By nightfall, we were back on a train heading north, back toward uncertainty and danger and the kind of love that burns rather than warms. Dominic held my hand the entire way, and for the first time in months, he looked like he was actually present in his own life. The letter came exactly 1 year after we returned to Stockholm. It had no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was Matteo's, written in the careful, controlled script of a man learning to write left-handed from prison. Fratello, I've had a long time to think about what I did, what I tried to do, what I failed to prevent. The guilt hasn't gotten lighter with time. If anything, it's become heavier, more substantial, more impossible to ignore. I betrayed you. I tried to have you killed. I would have sacrificed everything, my family, my honor, my own future for the illusion of control. And when I failed, I spent my time in prison hating you for being stronger, smarter, more capable of surviving than I was. But I've been receiving letters from Alessandra. She's been writing from prison too, and she's been telling me things about why you made the choices you made. About how everything you did was in service of something larger than yourself. About how you destroyed your own empire so that the people running it couldn't destroy anyone else. I want you to know that I understand now. Not forgive myself, I don't think I'm capable of that, but understand what you were trying to do, and respect you for having the courage to do it. When I get out, and I will get out, they're saying 3 more years, I won't come looking for you. I won't try to rebuild. I won't try to explain myself or ask for forgiveness or do any of the things that my pride once demanded. I'll just live quietly and try to become a person who deserves a second chance. I hope you find what you're looking for. I hope that woman, I hope she makes you happy in ways that the life we built never could have. Your brother Matteo. I found Dominic in the bookshop, reading in the corner where he spent most of his free time. When I handed him the letter, he read it slowly, carefully, like he was trying to translate it from a language he'd nearly forgotten. He's going to be okay, he said when he finished. How do you know? Because he's writing like someone who's finally understanding himself. That's not something that leads to destruction. That's something that leads to maybe not happiness, but peace. He set the letter down and reached for my hand. Come with me. He took me to a jewelry store, a small place in Gamlestan tucked between a cafe and a vintage clothing boutique. The jeweler was expecting us, or maybe she expected everyone. It was hard to tell with people who dealt in small, valuable things. I want to show you something, Dominic said. The ring she produced was old, centuries old, carved from gold with a single diamond set in a way that suggested it had been moved and reset many times. It looked like it had survived wars, been buried and unearthed, been loved by multiple women across multiple lives. It was my wife's, Dominic said. It was supposed to go to my sister when Julia died, but I couldn't let go of it. I couldn't let anyone else have something that meant so much. He took the ring from the jeweler's hand. I want you to have it now, not because I'm trying to replace her memory, but because I'm finally ready to stop carrying her death around with me. I'm ready to build something new. Are you sure? No, I'm terrified. But I'm sure that being terrified with you is better than being alone with my guilt. He dropped to one knee right there in the middle of the jewelry store, and I heard the jeweler gasp like she was seeing something she'd been waiting for her whole life. I don't know how to be a normal man. I don't know how to be anyone except the version of me that's broken and dangerous and obsessed. But I know that if you marry me, at least my brokenness will be less lonely. That's the least romantic proposal I've ever heard. I said, I know. But it's true, and I've learned that truth is better than poetry when it comes to important things. Yes, I said. Yes, I'll marry you. We were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony by the water, with only Alessandra and a handful of people we'd come to trust in our new life. Dominic wore a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, and I wore a simple white dress that made me look like I belonged in a fairy tale instead of a crime thriller. When the officiant asked if he took me to be his wife, he answered, I've already taken her as my salvation. Marriage is just the paperwork. The guests laughed. I cried. After the ceremony, we walked along the water, and Dominic was quiet, absorbing the weight of what we'd just done, transforming from people hiding together into people bound together, legally and morally and in every way that mattered. Do you ever regret it? He asked as we stood watching the water, meeting me, staying with me. This entire complicated, dangerous, exhausting existence we've built together. I thought about the palazzo and the photographs and the jacket I still kept, folded carefully in a drawer. I thought about the violence and the blood and the men who'd died because of his choices. I thought about the fear and the running and the nights I'd spent wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. Every day, I said. And I wouldn't change a single second. He smiled, that smile I'd learned to read, the one that lived somewhere between dangerous and broken and beautiful. He pulled me close, and for a moment, we were just two people by the water in a city that didn't know our history, that didn't care about our past, that was content to let us exist as we were. The other day, he said into my hair, I was sorting through boxes in the apartment, and I found something. It was a photograph of my wife. I thought I'd packed everything away, but I'd missed this one. My body went rigid. Dominic? Don't panic. I'm not trying to hurt you by bringing her up. I'm trying to tell you something. He pulled back far enough to look at me. When I saw that photograph, I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel the old guilt. What I felt was gratitude. Gratitude that she'd existed, that she'd loved me, that our time together had been real. But also gratitude that she was gone. Because if she wasn't, you'd never have come into my life. That's a terrible thing to be grateful for. I know. Welcome to being married to me. He kissed my forehead. I'm gonna do terrible things sometimes. I'm gonna have nightmares that make me wake up convinced I'm still in the palazzo, still making impossible choices. I'm going to be afraid that one day you'll wake up and realize you married a monster. And I'm going to remind you, I said, that I chose this. Every single day I'm choosing you, knowing exactly what that choice means, so stop trying to save me from myself. We walked back to the apartment as the sun was setting, painting Stockholm in shades of amber and rose. Inside, Dominic poured us wine, expensive wine, the kind of wine that probably came from a vineyard that didn't ask too many questions about its customers. I have something else for you, he said. He produced a small box and inside was a key. Not a metaphorical key. An actual key, ornate and old, attached to a piece of paper with an address written in his careful handwriting. The palazzo. I asked, confused. My family is selling it. My mother decided she couldn't stay there after everything that happened. There's a clause in my trust. A clause that lets me purchase it before it goes to auction. He took the key from my hand and closed my fingers around it. I want to buy it. I want to go back there. And I want you to help me transform it from a place of secrets into a place of healing. How would we even do that? I don't know yet. But I know I can't keep running forever. At some point, I have to stop and face what I've done. At some point, I have to build something on top of the ruins I've created. He pulled me into his arms. And I want you beside me when I do. We spent that night on the small balcony of our apartment, watching the medieval city breathe beneath us. Dominic held me like he was afraid I'd disappear, and I let him, because I understood finally that this was the only kind of love he knew, the desperate, consuming, absolutely unhinged kind. The kind that burned instead of warmed. The kind that could destroy you just as easily as it could save you. But it was our kind of love. And despite everything, despite the violence and the blood and the mountains of broken things we'd built our life on top of, it was enough. As midnight approached, Dominic pulled the old navy jacket from the closet, the one he'd told me to remove that first day in the palazzo. It was worn now, faded, carrying the weight of all the years that had passed since he'd asked me which brother I'd die for. "I don't know why I keep this," he said, but we both knew why. "It's a reminder," I told him, "of how far we've come, or how far we still have to go." I took the jacket from him and held it up to my shoulders, and it still swallowed me whole, still felt like armor. "Maybe," I said, "we don't go anywhere. Maybe we just stay here, in this moment, and let it be enough." He smiled, that dangerous, broken, beautiful smile, and pulled me toward him, and the jacket fell to the floor between us like something sacred that had finally completed its purpose. Outside, Stockholm slept, and the medieval streets twisted like a promise, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang out the hour. We were no longer running. We were no longer hiding. We were just two people who'd destroyed everything to find each other. Finally learning how to live in the wreckage, it would have to be enough, and somehow, impossibly, it was.